You'll find the link to download the plans for free in the video description. They will print full size on A4 paper. To get us started, we'll have a watch of an animation that Raymond has once again made for us. This will give you a rough idea of how it all goes together. After that, I'll explain some details of how the internals go together. We'll then look at the shells, magazine and barrel. I also have a video that explains how the automag actually works, and I will link that at the end of this video. With the side plate off, I'll explain some of the other parts. The magazine catch, you would normally remove it by taking out this screw. This would then slide back and up, out through here. There's a little tiny spring in there, a little spring which contacts this surface here. And I can glue that spring in place so that the whole unit comes out and I don't lose the spring in the pistol somewhere. The shell pusher is set up in much the same way. Once you remove that pin, that would normally slide up and through the top. It also has a slightly stiffer spring, but again that spring can be glued onto this part so it doesn't get lost. The trigger is very simple and doesn't need a spring. I made that from 6mm plywood, but it can be solid wood instead. You can just make out the spring for the releaser over there. Again, a fairly stiff spring. These two parts are held in place by this side plate, which if you take those screws out, will come right off. Over on this side you can see the ejector ramp. Nice curved surface to deflect those shells. The shells themselves are 10 by 18mm pieces of aluminium. You could also use wooden dowel, and the reason for that cut is just sound. I'll now cover the details of the magazine and barrels. So at the front, we've got the heel of the magazine, which controls how far the magazine is inserted. We've got a cutout for the catch, and we've got the feed lips up here. They're sort of like L-shaped pieces of wood with a small contour cut onto the inside. Shells feed in just like that, and that compresses an extension spring which is pinned in place up here and screwed onto the follower here. This spring is pretty much identical to what you'd expect to find inside a stapler. So that's the magazine. As for the barrels, a short one is 5 inches in length. And that works quite well for size 12, 16, 34 and 61 rubber bands. The long barrel is 10 inches in length, and that works well for size 19 and 34 rubber bands. Now I've tried about half a dozen different designs for the muzzle, so I would suggest staying with this one because it is the only design that is quite accurate. So there we go. There are 2 templates for the side plate, one for the left, one for the right. That's because the larger holes need to be precisely drilled to a certain depth, and this little drilling jig will help with that. The barrel also needs to be very precisely drilled, and again you can make a jig for that. Once the barrel's drilled, you can insert the threaded rod, and that will fit into the block with a hex nut. You're much better off though using these threaded plugs. I'm not really sure what they're called though. After that you can start assembling the main parts of the frame. That rod that goes through the bolt shouldn't quite contact the rotor. You can see a tiny little gap. The geometry of the ejector, the geometry of the ejector is a little bit strange, so I better leave a photo of that. The hammer is held in place by a spring-loaded plug, just to ensure it doesn't flap around in the breeze. Any kind of screw will work for the magazine release button, but I suggest one that sticks out a little more than this one that I have installed. The additional parts of the bolt can be glued in place, and then the whole thing can be cut down later. Here are the details of the top. Those 2 pins are designed to hold a very, very light extension spring, or a rubber band if you don't have one. This cutout and latch in the left grip plate is actually very important, because the bolt needs to be held back for loading.